In the vast expanse of existence, there lies a thin, almost imperceptible line between the born and the unborn. It is in this boundary that the story unfolds, where fate, destiny, and the very essence of being begin to take shape. For those who are born, life is a series of choices and consequences, each step carrying the weight of the past and the promise of the future. For the unborn, however, there is only potential, a realm where dreams have not yet been realized and where possibilities remain endless. But what if the unborn could influence the born? What if their whispers, their silent hopes, could guide those who walk the path of life?
The trot behind.
When you look deeper, you see there's no true separation between the wave and the ocean itself. In the same way, you are not a separate wave, but the infinite ocean. You have no beginning, no end, and nothing to lose. This is not a theory. It's something you can see for yourself right now. Over the next few minutes, we're going to peel back the layers of illusion, examine the nature of reality, and explore why the concept of you, the one you hold so tightly to, is the root of all suffering. So let's step beyond the mind and into the truth, because once you see it, you'll realize you were never born. And that's the most liberating discovery of all. Close your eyes for a moment and ask yourself, who am I? Your mind will immediately rush in with answers. I'm a parent, a teacher, an artist. I'm someone who loves, who struggles, who dreams. But pause for a moment and dig deeper. Who is the one saying these things? Who is it that calls these thoughts mine? This is where the illusion begins. From the moment we're born, we're conditioned to believe in a separate identity, a me that stands apart from everything else. We're taught that this self has boundaries, that it starts with our skin and ends with the world outside. We carry this illusion like a badge, reinforcing it with every thought, every emotion, every action. But have you ever stopped to truly question it? Let's take a closer look. Imagine holding a cup of water. It's easy to think of the water as separate from the ocean. But if you pour it back into the sea, where does the water go? Can you pinpoint the exact moment when it stops being water in a cup and becomes ocean? The same is true for the self. What we think of as me, this bundle of thoughts, memories, and sensations, is like the water in the cup. It feels separate, but in truth, it has always been part of something infinite. Here's the problem. We believe so deeply in this separate self that we spend our lives defending it, nurturing it, and fearing its loss. We think, this is my body, my mind, my life. But is it really? Think about it, your body is constantly changing. The cells that make up your skin, your organs, even your brain, they're replaced over time. The body you have now is not the same body you had 10 years ago. So how can you say it's truly you? And what about your thoughts? They're fleeting, aren't they? One moment you're happy, the next you're sad. One moment you believe in something with all your heart, the next you've changed your mind. If your thoughts are constantly shifting, how can they define who you are? Let's go even further. Imagine a thought arises. I am afraid. Where is this fear located? Is it in your mind, your body, or is it simply a passing sensation, like a cloud drifting across the sky? When you stop identifying with the thought, you'll notice something remarkable. It loses its power. John Wheeler puts it plainly. What you take yourself to be, this limited, struggling person, is nothing more than a concept, a story you've told yourself based on memories of the past and projections of the future. But who you truly are is none of these things. Your true nature is like the space in a room. The space doesn't change, no matter what objects are placed within it. A chair, a table, even people. They come and go, but the space remains untouched. You are that space. You are the awareness in which all experiences arise and dissolve. When you begin to see through this illusion of self, something extraordinary happens. You stop clinging to the stories of I am this or I am that. You realize that your true essence is boundless, limitless, and completely free. The illusion of self is not your enemy. It's simply a misunderstanding. And once you see through it, the world opens up in ways you never imagined. So take a breath. Relax into the knowing that you're not the wave. You are the ocean itself. And this realization is just the beginning. Let's take a moment to ask the most profound question of all. Who are you really? You might answer, I'm a person, a mind, a body, a collection of experiences. But let's go deeper. Strip away the labels, the roles you play, and the stories you tell yourself. What remains? Start by considering your thoughts. Thoughts are like clouds in the sky, always changing, coming and going without warning. One moment you're thinking about dinner, the next you're replaying a conversation from yesterday. But here's the key question. Who is noticing these thoughts? Think about it. If you can observe a thought, you cannot be that thought. You're the one watching. And this awareness of your thoughts, this unchanging presence, has been with you your entire life. It's been there in moments of joy, in moments of pain, and even in the quiet gaps between your thoughts. Now, turn your attention to your emotions. When anger arises, you might say, I am angry. But pause and look closely. Is the anger who you are? Or is it just an energy passing through you, like a storm moving across the sky? It's intense for a time, but eventually it fades, and yet the sky, the space in which the storm appears, remains untouched. You are not the anger, you are the sky. What about your body? It seems like such an obvious part of who you are. But even the body is not constant. Cells die and regenerate. Your appearance changes over the years. The body you inhabit today is not the same one you had as a child. So, can it truly be you? And if you're not your body, your thoughts, or your emotions, then who are you? Let's try something radical. Stop looking for answers in the mind and turn your attention to awareness itself. Right now, as you listen to this, there's a knowingness, a presence that is aware of these words, aware of your surroundings, aware of your very being. This awareness is constant. It doesn't come and go like thoughts or emotions. It doesn't age or change like the body. It's simply here, always silently witnessing everything. But awareness is not something you can grasp or hold on to. It's not an object you can point to and say, this is me. And yet, it's undeniably present. You don't need anyone to tell you it's there. You can feel it here and now, as the foundation of your existence. Here's another way to look at it. Imagine sitting in a dark room with a candle. The flame illuminates everything in the room, but it doesn't need to light itself. It's already shining. In the same way, awareness doesn't need to be aware of itself. It simply is. John Wheeler describes this awareness as your true nature, what you've always been, and what you'll always be. It's not bound by your thoughts, emotions, or body. It's free, infinite, and ever present. But what does this mean for you practically? It means you don't have to chase after enlightenment or a future state of being. The awareness you're seeking is already here. It's the part of you that has never changed, never suffered, and never been lost. Here's a simple exercise to see this for yourself. Take a moment to notice your breath. You don't need to control it. Just observe. Feel the air as it moves in and out. Now, shift your attention to the awareness that is noticing the breath. This awareness is not doing anything. It's not trying to achieve or become anything. It's simply witnessing. And in this witnessing, you realize something profound. You are not a person experiencing awareness. You're awareness experiencing a person. When you see this clearly, the search for who you are comes to an end. You realize that your true nature is not something you have to find or create. It's something you've been all along. So take a deep breath. Rest in this awareness, this presence, and let everything else, the thoughts, the emotions, the roles you play, fade into the background. They're just passing waves. You are the ocean, infinite and still. This is the heart of who you are, and once you see it, you can never unsee it. What does it mean to say you were never born? At first glance, it seems absurd. After all, you have memories of your childhood, a birth certificate, and photographs from when you were a baby. But what if these were merely parts of a story? A story that doesn't define who you really are. The idea of being unborn is not about denying the physical reality of your body. It's about seeing through the illusion of separateness. It's an invitation to recognize a truth so profound that it challenges everything you've ever believed about yourself. Let's start here. The belief that you were born implies a beginning, doesn't it? A starting point where you came into existence as an individual. But here's the paradox. Your true essence has no beginning and no end. It wasn't born, and it cannot die. It is timeless, boundless, and unchanging. The belief in being born traps you in the illusion of being a limited, separate self. A self with a story, a name, and a past. But the truth is, you are not your story. You are the awareness in which the story unfolds. You are not a moment in time. You are the timeless presence that has always been here, silently watching. Let's explore this further. When you were a child, your body was small, your thoughts simple, and your world limited to what you could see and touch. Over time, your body grew, your thoughts became more complex, and your experiences multiplied. But through it all, wasn't there something constant? That constant is the awareness that witnessed it all. It wasn't born with your body, and it won't end when your body dies. It's like the screen on which a movie plays. The images and sounds may change, but the screen itself remains untouched. Here's where this understanding becomes truly transformative. Most of our fears and struggles come from clinging to the idea of being a separate self. A self that was born, a self that will die, a self that can be hurt or lost. But when you see that this self is just a concept, an illusion, those fears dissolve. Think about it. If you were never truly born, how can you truly die? If you've never been separate, what is there to lose? John Whelan describes this as the ultimate liberation. You realize that what you are is not bound by time, space, or form. You are the awareness in which all of these things appear and disappear. And this awareness, your true essence, is free. It has no limits, no suffering, no birth, and no death. Here's a simple exercise to see this for yourself. Right now, notice the thoughts in your mind. They rise and fall like waves. Now, notice your awareness of those thoughts. Does your awareness rise and fall, or does it remain constant, untouched by the coming and going of thoughts? When you shift your attention to awareness itself, you begin to see the truth. You are not the story, the wave, or the thought. You are the unchanging presence in which everything appears. This is the essence of being unborn. It's not a denial of life, but a recognition of what you are, beyond the body, beyond the mind, beyond the story. It's the ultimate realization that frees you from fear, suffering, and the illusion of separation. Take a moment to sit with this. You've never been bound, you've never been limited, and you've never been born. You're the ocean, vast and infinite, with no beginning and no end. The ego is the centerpiece of the story you tell yourself. It whispers, I am this, I am that. It claims ownership of your thoughts, your actions, and even your worth. But have you ever paused to ask, what is the ego really? For most of us, the ego feels like the core of who we are. It's the voice in our head that narrates every moment of our lives, the sense of being a me, distinct from everything else. But when you take a closer look, you'll find something surprising. The ego isn't real. Let's begin with a simple exercise. Close your eyes and bring to mind the thought, I am me. Notice how it feels. Does it feel solid, like an undeniable truth? Or does it feel like just another thought passing through your awareness? Here's the secret. The ego exists only as a thought. It's a mental construct, a bundle of ideas about who you think you are. It's the sum of your memories, beliefs, and desires. But none of these things are constant. They come and go, and yet you remain. Think about it. If the ego were truly who you are, wouldn't it be constant? But it's not. One moment you're confident, the next you're doubtful. One moment you feel successful, the next you feel like a failure. The ego shifts and changes with every passing thought and emotion. And yet, there's something within you that doesn't change. Something that has been with you in every moment of your life, quietly witnessing it all. This is your true essence, your awareness. John Wheeler offers a powerful insight. The ego is nothing more than a story, a concept. It's the centerpiece of a narrative we cling to, believing it defines us. But when you investigate this narrative, you begin to see that it's built on assumptions. Let's dig a little deeper. Ask yourself, where is the ego located? Is it in your body? If so, where exactly? In your head, your chest, your heart? When you look closely, you won't find it anywhere. It's not a physical thing. It's not something you can touch, hold, or pin down. Then, consider your mind. Is the ego your thoughts? Perhaps it seems that way, but thoughts are transient. They arise. They linger for a moment, and then they dissolve. If you're your thoughts, then you would cease to exist every time a thought disappears. But you don't. Here's where it gets interesting. The ego's power lies in your belief in it. It's like a shadow, convincing, but without substance. When you believe the ego story, you feel small, limited, and separate. But when you see it for what it is, a construct, the whole illusion collapses. So, how do you break free from it? The grip of the ego begins with awareness. The next time you feel anxious, angry, or fearful, don't try to fix or suppress it. Instead, pause and ask yourself, who is feeling this? You might say, I am. But who is this I? Can you find it? Can you locate the one who is anxious, angry, or fearful? What you'll discover is profound. The feelings are real, but the I who claims them is not. Here's another way to look at it. Imagine you're watching a movie. You get so absorbed in the story that you forget it's just a film. The ego is like that movie. It feels real because you're deeply invested in it. But when you step back and see it for what it is, you realize you're not the character on the screen. You're the one watching. John Wheeler reminds us that breaking the myth of the ego doesn't require effort or struggle. It's not about fighting the ego or trying to destroy it. It's about seeing through it. Once you recognize that the ego is nothing more than a thought, it loses its grip on you. Imagine the freedom of living without the constant need to defend or prove yourself, without the burden of carrying your story like a heavy backpack. This is the freedom that comes from breaking the illusion of the ego. Take a deep breath. In this moment, let go of the idea of being a me. Rest in the awareness that is always here, always constant, always free. This awareness is your true self. It doesn't need a story, a label, or a past. It simply is. This is the truth that has been waiting for you all along. The ego was never real. You were never bound, and now you're free. Imagine for a moment living without the constant voice in your head that says, I am this, I am that, I need this, I fear that. Imagine a life where you are no longer bound by the limits of a separate self, where you move through the world with ease, free from the weight of self-doubt, fear, and striving. This isn't a fantasy, it's your natural state. Living without a separate self doesn't mean giving up your individuality or ignoring your responsibilities. It means seeing through the illusion of the ego and recognizing that life flows effortlessly without the need for a controlling me. Let's start with a simple observation. Have you ever noticed how much energy you spend trying to defend the idea of who you are? You want to be seen a certain way, achieve certain things, and avoid certain outcomes. But who is this you you're defending? When you really investigate, you find it's just a collection of thoughts. A story you've believed in for so long that it feels real. But what happens when you step back from that story? Consider this. Right now, as you listen to these words, life is happening effortlessly. Your heart is beating, your lungs are breathing, and your mind is understanding these concepts. You didn't have to decide to make any of these things happen. They simply arose on their own. This is the nature of life. When you stop clinging to the illusion of a separate self, actions, thoughts, and emotions arise naturally without the need for a central me to control them. It's like watching a river flow. The water doesn't ask for permission to move. It simply follows its natural course. But here's the key insight. Even the thought that says, I am doing this, is just another part of the flow. It's not evidence of a separate self. It's like a wave in the ocean, claiming to be independent from the sea. It's still just the ocean in motion. For example, think about making a decision. Perhaps you agonize over it, believing that the outcome rests solely on your shoulders. But when you live without a separate self, you begin to see that decisions arise naturally based on the situation, without the need for a controlling ego. You might think you're choosing, but in reality, the choice is simply happening. John Wheeler offers a liberating perspective. The idea of I is not necessary for life to function. It's a habit, a mental construct we've been conditioned to rely on. But when you look closely, you realize life unfolds perfectly well without it. Let's make this practical. The next time you feel stressed or overwhelmed, pause and ask yourself, who is experiencing this stress? Look for the me who is supposedly struggling. Can you find it? Or do you just find a cluster of thoughts and sensations arising in the present moment? When you see that there's no actual me at the center of your experience, something extraordinary happens. The stress doesn't disappear, but your attachment to it does. You realize that the thoughts and feelings are just passing phenomena, like clouds drifting across the sky. Living without a separate self doesn't mean life becomes perfect or free of challenges. It means you meet those challenges without the baggage of a false identity. If sadness arises, you feel it fully without labeling it as my sadness. If joy arises, you embrace it without clinging to it as my joy. This doesn't make you detached or robotic. On the contrary, it makes you more alive, more open. Without the constant chatter of the ego, you're free to experience life as it is, not as your mind thinks it should be. Here's another practical insight. When you stop identifying with a separate self, you stop taking things personally. Imagine someone criticizes you. Normally, the ego would leap to defend itself, creating conflict and tension. But when you see that there's no me to defend, the criticism loses its sting. It becomes just another event, like a leaf falling from a tree. This shift doesn't require effort. It's simply a matter of seeing clearly. The more you look, the more you realize that life flows effortlessly. When you let go of the illusion of control, the ego doesn't run the show. It never has. It's like a passenger on a train claiming credit for the journey, the train being something separate. So, take a deep breath and let this sink in. You don't have to strive to live without a separate self. It's already happening. The only thing that changes is your recognition of it. Life is not something you control. It's something you are. The river flows, the wind blows, and you're the awareness in which it all arises. Living without a separate self is not a goal to achieve. It's the truth of what you've always been. It's natural to feel doubt when encountering ideas that challenge the foundation of how you see yourself. The concept of having no separate self, of being unborn, can feel unsettling, even contradictory to your experience. But doubts and misconceptions are not obstacles. They are opportunities to see the truth more clearly. Let's begin by addressing a common question. If there's no separate self, then who is living this life? It's a fair question. You feel your emotions, you make decisions, you have memories. Doesn't that mean there's a you at the center of it all? Look closely, though, and you'll find that life unfolds naturally without the need for a central me. Thoughts arise on their own, feelings come and go, actions happen spontaneously. When you look for the self who claims ownership of all these experiences, you find only an empty space, a vast, open awareness. Here's an analogy to help clarify this. Think of a whirlpool in a river. It looks distinct, separate from the water around it, but the whirlpool has no independent existence. It's simply the movement of the river itself. The same is true of the self. It appears distinct, but it's just the flow of life taking shape temporarily in awareness. Another common doubt is, if there's no self, how do I live in the world? This is rooted in the belief that the ego is essential for functioning. But pause and consider, does the ego really control your life? Did it make your heart beat today? Did it decide to breathe? In this moment, life moves effortlessly without the need for a controlling eye. Decisions still happen, actions still arise, but they don't depend on the ego. Imagine driving a car. At first, you're hyper-aware of every movement, your hands on the wheel, your feet on the pedals. But over time, the process becomes natural, effortless. The car moves without you needing to think about every action. That's how life flows when you let go of the illusion of control. Here's another doubt you might encounter. If I'm just awareness, does that mean my life has no meaning? It's a question that strikes at the heart of our conditioning. We're taught that meaning comes from achieving, from being someone, from standing out. But true meaning doesn't come from what you do or achieve. It comes from simply being. It doesn't strive to have meaning. It simply shines, yet its light makes everything else possible. In the same way, your awareness, your presence is not something you have to prove or justify. It is inherently meaningful because it is the source of all experience. Now, let's address a deeper misconception. If there's no self, does that mean I don't matter? The ego thrives on being important, on being seen, on being validated. But when you look beyond the ego, you find that your true nature isn't small or insignificant. It's vast, boundless, and deeply connected to everything. John Wheeler explains this beautifully. The idea of a separate self is like a drop of water, imagining it's isolated from the ocean. But when the drop lets go of its boundaries, it doesn't disappear. It becomes part of the ocean. The ocean letting go of the ego doesn't diminish you. It reveals your infinite nature. Finally, let's imagine this. You're standing on the shore of a vast ocean, watching the waves crash against the sand. You don't try to own the waves or control them. You simply marvel at their beauty. Living without a separate self is like that. You experience life fully, without grasping, without resistance, without fear. So, as we come to the end of this journey, let's return to the core question. Who are you really? You've looked deeply into the Natu. But let's clarify. This truth isn't about rejecting life or denying your experiences. It's about embracing the fullness of life without being bound by the illusio. So, what does this mean for how you live? It means you no longer have to chase after meaning or run from fear. You don't have to cling to the past or worry about the future. Life becomes an unfolding moment by moment, free from the need to control or resist. Think about it. Without the constant weight of the ego, you're free to live with lightness and openness. Relationships become richer because you're no longer defending a false identity. Challenges become opportunities. John Wheeler reminds us that the search for truth ends when we realize we were never lost. The idea of being unborn isn't a denial of life. It's an affirmation of the boundless, timeless essence that you are. You've never been limited, never been separate, and never been incomplete. Take a moment now to rest in this realization. Feel the stillness, the peace, the free. So, as you go back into the world, carry this understanding with you, not as an idea, but as a living truth. Let it guide your actions, soften your fears, and deepen your connections. Remember, you're not a person striving to find awareness. You're awareness itself, and that awareness is free. It has always been free. Thank you for walking this path with me. May this truth continue to unfold in your life, bringing clarity, peace, and liberation. The journey is complete because you were never truly separate from the destination. WhoAmI.